Anything outside the window of tolerance, bad. Anything in the window of tolerance, we are is the optimal zone. We perform well, we feel good, we treat others with respect, we feel respected. That is happy land.
The big takeaway for me is that there are zones. So the green zone is where we want to be. That's the window of tolerance. That's the sweet spot. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Steps. We are excited to be here to wrap up our three-part series with Ashley Mowrey on the window of tolerance. We're going to hit the highlights of what we learned and share how we are applying it personally.
Yeah, I liked this topic because I feel like this is something that affects everybody. I don't care what activity, what sport you're in, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, this is something everybody can identify with. And I think just putting a name to something, Ashley does a really good job at making things practical and make sense in a way that everybody can understand really easily. Basically, the window of tolerance is where we want to live, right? Our window of tolerance is where we can live in happy land and function in a healthy way before everything goes to crap. So anything outside the window of tolerance, bad. Anything in the window of tolerance, we are is the optimal zone. We perform well, we feel good, we treat others with respect, we feel respected. That is happy land. And the goal is to figure out how to stay in that little box, right? Which is more challenging than I think we would like to admit. So that was my sort of takeaway of if we want to define the window of tolerance at a very basic level, that's what it is to me. And it can shrink or it can get bigger, but it takes work, right? So that's kind of my takeaway of the definition. But Melissa, what do you think about it?
My biggest takeaway is my window is like very, very slim, but that's not one the viewers really care about. The big takeaway for me is that there are zones. So the green zone is where we want to be. That's the window of tolerance. That's the sweet spot. But then you have the red zone, which is where you are hyper aroused, meaning that you're in an anxiety state. And then there's the blue zone where you've shut down. They call the red zone fight or flight, usually in psychological terms, and the blue zone is your freeze state. And when you get in red or blue, your goal is to get back to green, and you're going to automatically get to red or blue. It's going to happen. It's not anything you do on purpose, but the goal is to regulate so that you can get back into that green. So that's my big takeaway. And we had a PDF about that. So make sure when you watch the episode, you see that PDF and you can see the visual there.
Ashley's always great about providing those visuals and she's really good about free resources. So if you join her community, she gives a lot and which is really nice. But so then we moved on to the segment two of the conversation. So the first conversation sort of centered around what is this window of tolerance and what does it mean and what does it require of us and things like that. But in the second part of the conversation, we what we learned what pushes athletes specifically because we talk about performance athletes, what pushes them to go outside of that window of tolerance. And, a lot of times it's not voluntary. Like things just there's stressors that put us outside of that optimal window. And so for me, what did you think was the most prevalent thing about that window of tolerance? That second episode.
Yeah, that second episode, which challenges are going to push you outside, being outside of the window for a long period of time or frequently has these long term implications. And that was a big overall takeaway from the episode that, years of being in that, which as athletes, normally you are, especially at a high level, you've been training for years, you've been working in this space for years. And so being in a red or a blue zone for a long period of time can cause harm like burnout, frequent injuries, make it harder to recover, and make it harder to move back into the green zone. So there are early warning signs that you should listen to so that you can start to regulate early, so that you don't have those long-term harmful effects from being outside of your window of tolerance. So, overall, that was my big summary and takeaway from the episode. What about you, Bree?
I don't know. I think it's interesting when you frame it in as a dancer because that's obviously our background. But I have a kid that plays soccer and Gregory plays football, and you can really apply it to anything. But I think it's interesting that it's something when you think of dancers, dancers go through so many ups and downs in such a small window of time. It's an all day thing. So your adrenaline is constantly being kicked in and out of high gear the entire day. You're getting ready and you're amped up to get on the stage. You get on the stage and you do a 2-minute piece to which you're sometimes super active in the piece and sometimes you're not super active in the piece. And then you get off stage and you have to come down and then you have to relax and you have to change your clothes, which gets it ramped up again. And then you come down and you wait till the next performance and then you go back up. And so all day long, you're like this. So that in and of itself can just kick you right out of that window, right? And so it requires everybody to be extremely aware. um but from a coach's perspective, my biggest concern when we had the second part of the conversation was like, how do you sometimes things can get really heightened and really disrespectful when somebody is in the red zone in particular, right? The way they behave is unacceptable. You can't use that. People can't see that and think, oh, I can get away with that too. So we learned in that second part of the conversation that regulating doesn't necessarily mean you're ignoring it. You need to work together sort of as a team to figure out how to get the best out of this person and get them back into their optimal window, which can sometimes feel like you're ignoring things, but you're not. You're adjusting for that person's uh, best performance to get them back to their peak performance level, right? Also, that focusing on healthy habits leading up to a performance. Ashley mentioned this a lot: performance, a game, a tournament, or a big event of some sort, to keep yourself as regulated as possible. And almost it felt like give yourself the best chance for success, right? Mentally, emotionally, physically. And so it's not just the day of it and techniques you can do to stay in that window of tolerance. It's what can you do the whole week before to make sure that you're reaching peak performance and staying in that window.
Hmm. Absolutely. And our third episode was about tools. What can we do? Bree, what did you think about that? What was your overview on that?
My biggest thing was different zones require different techniques and approaches, which I didn't really realize. Right? She talked about how the green zone is where we want to live. Right? I think of like green means go. That's what I was thinking of. The red zone, you're just in such a heightened state of anxiety and sometimes anger that it requires the opposite, the calming and relaxation techniques. She talked about relaxing scents. Like I love lavender. That was a big note for me. Relaxing music. My friend and my business partner Casey is always talking about frequencies and listening to tones that are music in your frequency, and it's different for everybody. What speaks to you, right? Textures, soft, relaxing textures, and breath work, which explains why I always like being wrapped in a warm, cozy blanket, right? Where the blue zone requires energetic and active techniques like smelling or sucking on a peppermint, splashing your face with cold water, shaking exercises, spicy foods, balancing on something to get your mind off of the issue at hand. So just understanding that there's different techniques for different feelings and strategy to it was interesting to me.
Absolutely. And she also gave us another resource, actually just giving us free stuff all over the place during that episode. It was a download of the 5 S's of regulation, and shaking, finding a safe space was an S, sighing, soothing yourself with, like you said, a nice warm blanket, or spotting the feeling, which means naming the feeling. So those 5 S's were my big takeaway. And those are also available as a free download if you watch the episode.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you to the viewers out there for joining us on this 4-week journey as we sort of dive into the window of tolerance. It's sort of a new format that we're trying for season 6. We give lots of information on the show, and we're hoping by breaking it up into smaller segments that it makes it easier to digest and understand and apply in your own life and what you have going on. Special thanks again to our friend and frequent guest of the show, Ashley Mowrey, a mindset skills educator, for joining us to kick off season 6 of Beyond the Steps. She's a wealth of knowledge on how to practically apply all these techniques to keep us in our optimal window of tolerance and regulate ourselves. And also, thank you, Ashley, for the helpful free resources. You can check out more about Ashley at ashleymowrey.com, and we're going to link that in the show notes. Remember, everybody out there that's learning about the window of tolerance for the first time, performance isn't just physical. Your mindset and regulation are key to staying in your optimal zone. Remember that, put it up on your mirror or your wall, whatever, say it to yourself every day. For all of you out there, thank you for your continued support for Beyond the Steps. We're so grateful to be able to do this together every week. And for all of you, make sure to subscribe, share, like, all the things, and stay tuned for our next series at Apollo Performance and TP Dance Creations on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Join us next week. And until then,